So today we're going to talk about the second facet of a healthy small group, which is consistency. Consistency is, for most people, one of the harder things about a small group because unless it's mandated, you have to show up for a work meeting. It's one of those things where you start, especially at the beginning, questioning like, do I need to do this? What happens if I miss? If I'm not there, does anything? But when you're not present, you have to realize what that does to the level of trust, especially if a small group continues to meet without a particular member. And it's not a big deal if one person misses 1 week. Don't get me wrong. But if you keep missing over time, at some point that small group begins to develop relationships without you, without those individual people, those individual team members. That consistency of attendance, just showing up, is a powerful reminder that you're committed to each other. So if you're going to plan a small group, or work with a small group, or even join a small group, make sure that you're talking to the people about committing to be there for each other in this small group at the appropriate time. Now, I've dealt with it, as I said before, as a pastor, and some of that would be with students. And so students would come together for small groups to meet in a midweek group to talk about a particular issue or about their faith. And some weeks they got sick, and some weeks they had homework, and some weeks they just couldn't make it because it was too cold. But when they consistently showed up, over time, they started to see how much they grew together. As an executive, I regularly scheduled a small group team meeting for my teams to meet to say, listen, we're just going to sit down and talk. And some of that was about doing updates, but also some of it was about actually just encouraging one another and listening to one another and figuring out if there's ways we could help one another. That consistency of the meeting, hey, every Wednesday we're all going to be in this space at this time, and unless you're sick or traveling, you need to be here. This is a priority. That's what consistency shows. It shows that these relationships with these people are a priority to you, and that commitment to consistency over time yields results. The best small groups I've ever been in were the ones that were the most consistent. Because relationships to develop need time. Now, we like to speed things up and hurry things up because we think that speed and efficiency to make small groups better would work, but it doesn't. Because human relationships are often best when they're inefficient. I mean that. Think about what you would say if I said you were going out with one of your best friends or with 2 or 3 of your friends for coffee tomorrow. Would you be in a hurry? Would you have to get an agenda to talk through everything? No. Why? Because human relationships are naturally inefficient. Some things, when you speed them up, are not better. If you were going to make chocolate chip cookies, you would put them in an oven. And when you put them in an oven and they bake at just the right temperature, for just the right amount of time, you start to smell it. Can you smell it? You get excited. But it takes time. Now imagine you say, well, I think we should be able to get chocolate chip cookies quicker. Okay? Stick them in the microwave. Cook them that way. You will not want to eat them. They're gross. They're gooey. They're falling apart. And generally, even some of the edges are burned, and it's not a good sight. Why? Because you tried to speed something up that wasn't meant to go fast. Consistency allows us to build relationships over time because we need to invest time in those relationships to see them grow and flourish. But in the same way that I'm saying consistency somewhat about attendance, you also have to recognize there's a second part of consistency, and that's actually about consistency of engagement. Why? Because I've seen people that showed up at a meeting every week and didn't engage. They sat in the corner, isolated, away from everyone else, refused to engage, didn't build any relationships. And in fact, actually, I think wound up causing other problems for the other team members or other group members because they saw the person who was present and didn't engage, and they either had to try and how to stop and draw them in, which took time away from spreading it evenly amongst the group, or they ignored the person, and now they had this awkward feeling about this person sitting off to the side, this person's looking at their phone, this person's not engaging. You need consistency of engagement as well. So if you're going to join a small group or lead a small group, I'm encouraging you that every single member of the small group commit to being present. How do you do this? Well, I had a group of students one time that did this on their own, group of teenagers. So you might think, oh no, they love their technology. They actually had a box for their small group when you walked in the door that you had to put your phone in. Every single one of them. You have to put your phone in here. Why? Because they didn't want to be distracted. They wanted to consistently engage with one another for the reason that they were there as a small group, to encourage one another and help one another. Even the writer in the scriptures, the writer of the book of Hebrews in the scriptures, in chapter 10, verse 25 says, do not give up meeting with one another as some are prone to do, but encourage one another. He keeps using those words. Encourage one another. It's not just about not giving up meeting. Yes, be consistent in your presence, but also be present and encouraging one another on a regular basis. Because when you do this, that's when you start to see the fertilizer that's put onto that seedbed of trust that you've created by affinity. You start watering and growing that and putting fertilizer on it. You start to see trust grow as people are consistently engaging with one another. You need both the consistency to be present and the consistency to engage. The worst small groups I've ever been in were the ones that were the least consistent, and the best small groups I've ever been in. And I would wager the best small groups you've ever been in were the ones that were the most consistent, both by being present and by being engaged with one another.